podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother Justice.
Man, it's a day. It's a day after a day. I'm gonna give you one more celebratory. Happy birthday. You know what I mean?
My man.
Move forward.
My man.
You know what I mean? Hope you enjoyed a delicious beverage or two, and then a nice plate of something that you eat, or if you ate. You know what I'm saying? However that played out.
Yeah. Nah, getting to this age is unique. So turning 45, right? Because it's like it has been said that 40 is an old young man, and 50 is a young old man, right? And so 45 kind of puts you right in the middle of all of it, right? And so it's one of those things that usually by 45 something hurts, right? Something on your body hurts, right? There's some ailment that lasts a little longer than it should, but at the same time, you still feel youthful, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I said, when I growing up, when somebody turned 45, I assumed they was gonna have like a small afro with a part on the side and a plaid suit. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what being 45 look like, right? Like,
right.
Smoking a pipe. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Some like brown shoes of some kind.
Smoking pipe with some brown shoes, feeling like your shoes is uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? Wearing a trench coat, right? So like, obviously what it means to be 45 in this day and time don't look like that, but it's an interesting reflection on kind of age and station. You know what I mean? So, and also kind of with that is, while you're 45 you're still young enough to be with the hip stuff, you definitely sometimes like, you know what, it might be time to go home and go to sleep. You know what I'm saying? Like, the things that may have moved you only 5 to 7 years ago don't move you as much anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's a interesting transition, but I appreciate the shout out.
Word up. So, well, I mean, in tune with age and age appropriate conduct, I think the place I wanted to start with. So over the last, it really, I guess, came to a head this week with the man's resigning, as it were. But John Gruden was implicated due to stuff he wrote in an email. And I don't know, implicated is the right word, but I used it. So I think it's good to give people context. The email in which John Gruden is just talking wild and saying ridiculously disrespectful, racist, insensitive, homophobic, all the phobics. You know what I'm saying? Language.
Yeah, he hit all the phobics.
You know what I'm saying? And just in his communication, and also speaking to a very specific sort of class dynamic of control and power as it pertains to the sport he's in. And I think it's important for context, like he's a football lifer type of dude, right? So him having this particular set of behavior, whether folks think it's fair or unfair, I think it's totally reasonable to go, this man's communication style in those emails was emblematic of what he thought was a prescribed, allowable set of behaviors with that group of people. I mean, obviously, we ain't never heard nobody from that time jump out and be like, hey, man, John Gruden just sent me the craziest email. I can't believe he said this to me. Right. So, but before I get down, and let me give folks that might not track with the sports ball world context. The Washington football team, formerly known as the Redskins for over 70, I think it's important to bring that up. they, as a part of an NFL investigation into unhealthy, toxic work environment, a whole general unhealthy situation going on there with their structure and leadership that led to the owner of the team being required to no longer be involved in the day-to-day operations of the team.
Right.
Right. I want all these links to make sure folks are thinking about this, right? Someone leaked from what's said to be 650,000 emails. These emails that were sent to, in a thread that was sent to Bruce Allen's, who was the GM, I think, at the time, or the president of the team at the time, whatever have you, work email, which is an important kind of thing to always think about. At least those of us who work somewhere, you might have your work email and you got your personal email. And there's certain stuff you send on your personal email, you don't send on your work email, because you work there. You know what I'm saying? And all that communication is could be subject to records requests, could be subject to investigation, but also, that's where you work, dog. That's for professional communication about, work stuff, that impacts the company and whatever you do, whether that's a nonprofit company, government, or a for-profit, corporate entity, whatever it is, should be related to the product or the kind of the services that you deliver or what have you, not, what I'm saying, you having roused about conversations about something you've seen in a hip hop video, what have you. Now I know everybody's jobs, not somebody sent out a kid's bake sale or some funny picture, and some cultures are different, whatever have you. But the point being, he sent these emails, somebody shared them, leaked them rather, from the investigation, and the ensuing fallout was one, I would say an immediate lack of trust, right? From some of his players. There was, especially current players. There were, but then there was also this thing to like defend him, and these different, depending on which media things you watched. Again, if you watch football, and ultimately on Monday of last week, he resigned after meeting with the what's the young Davis's name? It's not Al.
Oh man. Yeah, well, you know how I feel about him. He who shall not be discussed.
He resigned from the team, and so there's a couple different like entry points to think about this. The one that is most important to me, and why I thought about age, is that when he wrote these emails, I mean, it was over 10 years ago, and sometimes with stuff like this, people are like, well, it's 10 years ago, and he's different now, and the world's different now, and it's like, why would he be different? Nothing happened to him 10 years ago. Why should I believe that man is different? What evidence is he giving me to believe that he's different anyway? It's a ridiculous assertion.
Right.
Also,
especially if, yeah. I
mean, 48-year-old man.
Well, the thing is, there's nothing different, and no one came to his aid, right? So there's not a thing of like, well, he wrote this 10 years ago and then got a black friend or then got a gay friend and like on the road to Damascus and then figure out that he had to be different, right?
Right.
So to me, that was the big thing about, there is a conversation at some juncture on what is a time frame by which you can be fired for your current work, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is. I'm not asserting that he is being treated unfairly. I think he probably is being treated somewhat fairly here. But I think there is a very unclear understanding of if someone said something 20 years ago, does that disqualify you for something? At what point does it disqualify? Now, obviously, his was not a slip up. He had a culture, right? But to your point.
Mm-hmm.
To your point.
And that gets to me, is if something is revealed that puts into question your sincerity or like who you say you are, and especially in you work in a field that is, basically depends on your trust, right? Your character, the part of being a coach and a leader of a team. And I thought actually the coach of the Chargers made I think a really good statement about it. He's and someone I think he's also impacted by the same kind of coaching, kind of, but there's an affiliation there, I believe. I don't totally know. Or I can't remember totally. But the point being that if you're the person that's in charge, your conduct, how you communicate, things you do, even that are maybe off the field, off the lines, outside the scope of your maybe your entity, agency, company, it does point to like who you are. All right. Now that doesn't mean, that your whole world needs to be circumscribed, right? But there does need to be a level of decorum, a level of like, I guess I put it in this context. Like we always like America, like the United States has never had a president that, they've all been white men except for one. But so, I know it's not the most diverse body of leadership, but also they've never been like unmarried. Right. And even where other countries sometimes they have a leader that's either unmarried or they're divorced or whatever. Like, but this country is
especially Italy.
Right.
Italy is like the swinger. Like they have a swinger for a president, the prime minister. They are not. I mean, you make a good point because they are not like that. The idea of what we have as far as the appropriateness of someone's character identify by that. But yeah, I agree.
And I don't think that it like necessarily makes you a better president. It's something that in our society we go, people make a leap to go, how could you trust a person that doesn't, they can't be in a relationship with someone, which doesn't totally, there's also religious connections there. So I shouldn't leave that out. There's the assumption of a sort of, I would say a Christian structure idea, I would say, in like owning, loving the family and all that. But even for the current president, I mean, the fact that his first, wife died in a car accident and the kid, like there were, I think there's pieces and parts of the idea of like, what's the nature of your relationships. But what got blown off the table the week before was your man's Urban Meyer, being at his restaurant with I ain't cast no aspersions. I ain't saying I know what's going on in that video, but it looked like the young lady was trying to dance with him, and that wasn't his wife. And people, some people were more upset than others. Some people were upset with just the idea that you weren't with your team after a loss. You know what I mean? But the bottom line is it brings into question your judgment. Right. And what how you make decisions, what are the things, that guide your your actions as a leader. And I could imagine if I was on, and I'm here for the what's funny about this to me, because if I was on John Gruden's team after that, I'm like, he said that about DeMaurice. It's like, it's the first level is you still using big lip jokes, like you was using big lip jokes in the 2011s, 2010, like you ain't got no new age way to be disrespectful, like. But then it's like, okay, I guess you was a 48-year-old man, so that's all you had. He was 48 then. He's older than that now. Right. And then to say the other side of that, though, is like, if he do come to the office, coach, I'm giving you the business in team meeting. Hey, coach, when I is my lips too big for what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you gotta take all these barbs. Like, did you think that was cool? Like, and if you can manage that, now I guess apparently there's some other stuff that's come out that like they knew on Thursday of last week. The team found out before it was out in the media, right when it was out. He told the team and the people could come meet with him, blah blah blah. But it's just it gives a peer into because that dialogue, the thing that should be I think should be highlighted, and then we should think about within the context of the way our different systems engage and interact. That was a thread of communication involving a prominent member of the world of football. And the heads of several different corporate entities. So if this is how y'all talk, right, it lends to, if then someone asks within your entity, if there is a, I think one of the dudes was I can't remember the food chain. But there's a couple folks that were head of, some, I think fast food entity of some sort out of the Tampa area, was in that thread. It goes to like, if it be interesting things or disrespectful things going on within the context of your company, this is admissible stuff. This is stuff that is enough to go, do we need to take a look? Right. And I guess, before I have to keep on rambling, what to you, was there any particular salient idea or something, like, as I heard a question in regards like either leadership or character or even just conduct that came up to you that was something to think about?
Well, number one, I want to start with that this is the curse of Las Vegas. Number one. Never should have left Oakland. So number one. Never should have left Oakland. But for any listener that can't tell, I am a recovering Raiders fan. And they never should have left Oakland. And, the whole Gruden moving to Vegas, reclaiming like a good coach that they coached before, getting somebody that, kind of a return and all that kind of stuff that came with Gruden and basically turning the ship over to him. For a level of money that you really don't see coaches make, right? Mm-hmm. Coaches and general managers at the same time, right? So that's one thing. It's the curse of damn Las Vegas. Number two, there's a couple elements of culture that become really interesting. One is the culture of Gruden. Like you said, he said this thing as a 48-year-old man, not a 28-year-old man. So while, again, I still do think about, in a broader sense, is there a statute of limitations on conduct? Not conduct per se, but words and what they could mean, right? And I guess it's in the eye of the beholder. But he didn't say it as a 25-year-old hanging out with like certain people. He says a 40-year-old man who had been in football for years, right? Who deals with largely black, players. So this stuff wasn't like, you don't be around black folks. You just said it because you don't be around black folks. Like, no, you said it doing that. And then also the culture of, like you said, like juvenescent, like talking about Hooters and, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
But it's really just indicative of that broader kind of like culture that exists amongst like coaches in football, right? That gives birth to much of this stuff with Gruden. And I think, people knew. It's just like everyone held their nose, right? These type of things aren't like knowing the NFL knew that Gruden was a prick before last Thursday.
Right.
Everybody knows who he is and knows who he was. And, again, and this is real, but part of race in America and whiteness in America is the fact that you can be this kind of person and still make $10 million a year.
Right. Because a 10-year contract.
Any cursory glance at his background, cursory glance at how he fell out with people, cursory glance at everything would be like, yo, is he the kind of person that can take us to victory in the 21st century, given the teams that we're on and stuff like that, right? Given the current landscape of race, orientation, gender, can you do that for us? And the fact that no one thought to look deep enough because you was trying to get to damn Las Vegas, right? And you needed a hook to get to Vegas is indicative of a blind spot in NFL owner culture. Right. So that's where I think the culture conversation comes in. Number two, the interesting thing to me was they did the look into the Washington football team stuff because of a toxic space. Everyone knows their organization is super toxic, right? The only person who has been harmed coming out of this is John Gruden.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the only person. You had 650,000 emails and you told me he was the only person that slipped up. I don't buy that. He got what he got. He got what he got, and he should have confessed to it or talked about it prior. He should have went for some training like anybody else was thoughtful was a leader. But nobody else, no other emails, nobody slipped and said nothing dumb besides John Gruden. And then when they call for it to be like, hey, we need to look at this, it's kind of like, no, everything else is good, but case closed.
Right? Yeah. Like,
there's nothing else to see here.
Yeah. Well, and I guess my understanding is that it was a leak, so I guess they didn't officially want to let nothing else out of that. But basically, John Gruden and Bruce Allen are really the ones that are like hit up by this. You know what I mean? And I guess there's something in there too around communication. And I don't remember all the details with it of Adam, like a trans, some kind of communication with Adam Schefter, not necessarily Adam Schefter, not in the way that Gruden was, just something that I think would have been looked sort of inappropriate from a journalist perspective.
Right.
But nothing major, nothing super major.
So I think there's no accident when things get leaked, right? When things get leaked, this is, that was I argue that's purposeful, right? Like literally leak means someone purposely shared it with the world, right? But if, again, a treasure trove of 650,000 emails, right? There was no other leakable information there. Nobody said something that, they didn't like their team colors or something that was interesting. We only get John Gruden and Bruce Allen, right? Talking about Hooters and making all kind of juvenescent,
sending nudie pictures.
Yeah, like sending like a literally like a throwback. But it wasn't, I get it, but it wasn't 1979. It was 2011. This wasn't those situation where it's like you did this stuff and, times where people still went to drink martinis at lunch and, you know what I mean? Like you still had pinups in people's offices. Like,
right.
It was 2011. There's a level of decorum that you still should have been conducting yourself. And then, there's also this idea that I can imagine the teams are like, yo, so you think this way about people, but like you're in here coaching, like you don't think like this, right? Mm-hmm. Or you haven't thought like this. Even if I jumped to a conclusion with no proof that you don't think like this anymore, that you never talked about the fact that you have thought like this, right? And that there was a transition that you made and being able to talk about and describe the transition, right? There's none of that there.
Right.
So, simply for me, it's the curse of Las Vegas. And for the team, you just get thrown into a tailspin, right? Like of what this means. But it does again point to a culture of, NFL teams and NFL owners, and just the culture of them are overwhelmingly white men. And generally speaking, overwhelmingly white, especially GMs and presidents, if not coaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it does give you a peek into like, this is a culture that is part of how this stuff is done business. And then, it's just the fact that it's hard for certain white men to fail. And John Gruden is an example of that. It's hard to fail, even if you do dumb stuff.
So my only, my closing thought on that just is that, thinking about one, when we're thinking about trying to change sort of the structural change, in our society, the thing that to me is a tipped hand to is I operate from the idea that, I ain't saying that you a bad person. I ain't saying you're an irredeemable individual, but I was not like, oh my goodness, I can't believe John Gruden said such things in an email. Like no part of me was, it's weak sauce, it's whack, but I wasn't like, oh my goodness, how could he? It's like, no, and I'll just say this myself.
It's not a stretch.
Yeah, we I think especially at a certain age, we kind of go like, there's a chance you at least in some, you were, if not in a I didn't expect you to do it to sending it to somebody's corporate email, but if not in the form of an email, in a chat group, in some sort of circle of folks that you might meet up with, where maybe you're not real into that sort of language and view of the world, but someone else that you do business with, or have some long-standing either familial or other connection with, they dabble in that world. And when you with them, you may or may not be striding like, hey man, I ain't gonna have you around here using that kind of language.
Right.
You gonna stop talking about them people that way. You're gonna be like, nah, man, pass me. You're gonna make a wry, downturn kind of grin, and then have another sip of your gin and tonic, and maybe move over to the other side of the room and talk to other people because you don't like talking to the dude that talks that way.
Right.
But you ain't necessarily, we our experience, I would say, culturally, is we don't expect you to lose no business because you want to tell that dude that, you know what I mean, I think where you be talking about people of color is is inappropriate. You know what I mean? You ain't DeMarcus was a U.S. state attorney. Like that man, where you get the grounds to disrespect that man that way?
Right.
And no disrespect to football coaches, but you're a football coach. Like, settle down.
Well, that's my point. That's the thing about that. You could take somebody like, DeMarcus Smith being a celebrated lawyer and his role in the Players Association, and you could just reduce him to like saying he's like a blabbering idiot with big lips, right? Like you can do that, and that doesn't feel abnormal to you, right? You can minimize all that this person really is by tropes. And that's just like the power of race in our country, where that is like, oh, okay, yeah, I did that. Yeah, my bad. I won't make that mistake anymore, right? Like, and before the other stuff came out, it was like, okay, my bad. Right. I talked about I talked about him bad. My fault.
Yeah, I was.
I don't not like all black people. I just like this black person. And then next thing you know, he gets hit with the mollywop of the other emails, and next thing you know, he's gone.
Yeah.
So it is an indicator of just the peculiar way race plays out in our society.
Absolutely. And then I guess one last point, because I thought about too. Because the other thing is, if he just would have owned it and like, yeah, actually, I said some other wild stuff in them emails that's probably going to come out. So let me just say, you know what I'm saying? But he started trying to act like what he said didn't mean what it said.
Right.
Like, come on, man. Like, what about you? So anyway, I guess, lesson of the day is don't be John Gruden.
Don't be John Gruden.
You know what I mean? Be somebody else. Don't be them.
Be somebody else. Yeah. Don't be John Gruden. Just please.
So I guess on to topics of
power and money.
Power and money, but these are more of an entertainment context. Billions, a show that you and I enjoy. I guess the fifth season was released or completed. I don't remember the time, but I did get to watch it all finally, and kind of close out before the new season coming in, I guess January.
Yeah.
And I enjoy Billions for multitude of reasons. Because them dudes, some wild dudes, they be tripping. Operating with a certain level of impunity and remorseless attack on society, on the world as they see it. But I guess just start like what's something that I guess a touch point, you know what I'm saying, to enter into just sort of like an update on what's happening.
Yeah, I think to your point, I think Billions is really interesting for the interplay of money and power, and done in a slightly exaggerated, but not wholly exaggerated manner, right? Mm-hmm. And the complex interplay of power and power and lack thereof, right? Because I think there's an interesting interplay of like, there's people who are totally powerful in one space, but not powerful in another space. And then you use a whole bunch of usually underhanded methodologies in order to strengthen yourself in the spaces where you are not, or strengthen yourself versus other people, right? Mm-hmm. And then unfortunately, people are often used as pawns in that game, right? So I think Billions is a slightly more realistic account of like how those spaces live, and then just the also idiosyncrasies of people in power, right? I think it's a look into, often in the corporate space and in the political space. Before Trump, I would argue, we had this idea, for example, that presidents or people who are governors or these type of things are like largely rational people, right? Mm-hmm. They're largely rational people who just sometimes might make a bad decision, but largely rational. And that has undergirded, I think, our political understanding for decades, right? Trump obviously kind of broke that.
Yeah.
Trump just destroyed that idea, that covenant, if you will, that the president is a largely rational being that you just might disagree with on issues, right? But I think this show shows you how rational yet irrational people in power really are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what drives decisions and the impetus for decisions that impact so many other people, which I think in this day and time, given the role of business, the role of government is really interesting. And so I think locating this conversation, one is the beauty of the writing. One benefit that Billions has is that it always looks to remain very present. So even during the time they stopped filming, when they came back, if you and I discussed, they wrote COVID into the storyline.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. In a very kind of unique way. They wrote it in as like, this is what's happening in real time. So here's how we're going to say that here's a world of how power functions still given COVID.
Right.
And I think that was a really, really interesting part of it. Another thing real quick is just the interplay obviously between Chuck and Bobby Axelrod, Chuck Rose and Bobby Axelrod, and how it plays out. This idea that you will watch it and you always think like Axelrod will always find a way out, and like they finally don't. But that's a testament to the writing, because this was their way to write Axe out of at least the next season,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they use this idea that finally Chuck wins, but Chuck, spoiler alert,
Spoiler alert.
Chuck doesn't win.
Chuck does totally win.
Yeah, Chuck doesn't win. And then write somebody else into it. So I just think that the writing, and the thoughtfulness about making it relevant to the day, and again that interplay of power, which I think we're all in so many worlds, whether it's the corporate world, whether talking about the NFL, looking at politics right now about how Washington works, right? Like you can look at how Washington works, or insert any state capital, and show that there are people making what they consider entirely rational decisions, often based on irrational premises,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're making a decision to be like, hey, we won't raise the debt limit. Senator Cruz, because of a beef about Russia, just won't allow any of Biden's folks to get inducted, right?
Mm-hmm.
To go through the Senate, right? So we just get these things, and you're getting like this rational thing that someone thinks they're doing based on what I would consider in some ways irrational premises. And so Billions mirrors that element of real life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, again, as it pertains to our political space, there's going to be a time that I think, well, let me not say that. We're going to have the Vox Populi is going to have to start looking at the decisions that elected officials make on their behalf beyond the feeling of the decision. Like at some point it has to start being like, hey, have you thought about how this decision will impact us 5, 10 years, 15 years down the road, right? Versus on either side, Democrat, Republican, progressive, conservative, whatever have you, in our current discourse, every decision is made based on kind of like a very short-term self-fulfilling idea. So I'll leave it there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on that, because I think one of the things, and I hope I can get this sentence because it was forming in my head outright. The show displays the way sort of like our sense of like what you should do in order, like what happens when you either do to your perceived or real, power, the things that you have leverage over, the ability to influence or control, and or the ability for anyone, as they say, who gonna check me, boo? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Levels that you just go, yeah, they say I should do that, but why should I do that? I don't gotta do that. Right. Like just, so it's like, yeah, man, doing this to keep the prices of the what's name, healthy and make sure that, families can access healthy food at reasonable prices. And it'd be like, yeah, but that ain't got nothing to do with what I want. Right. What I want is do this so I can make this thing in my, do this, short sale, whatever particular financial activity. Right. And that if someone is like, it's when you're not ever in a position to do that in the world, you might think that no one would think that. Right. But then when someone is in a position where they're like, oh, actually, there's no one that could really kind of stop me from doing this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. You know what I mean? And what's your man? What's the pop road go to?
Chuck Rose Sr.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot it's a junior and senior. Chuck Rose Sr. is sort of just like the world is my way.
Yeah.
Like the conditions of decisions are rooted in sort of like what outcomes get me to what I want. Now, he does operate with a certain idea that him making these decisions like results in the world working. In a sense, like to me, when he I'm trying to think, like as a one I thought was hilarious, and I had rewatched that episode when they does the speech up in Yonkers about doing the development. That speech is and to protect these terrible people. It was like the worst. It was like, damn, homie, you gonna come into the community to build it? Just he did the full, urban renewal 1967, playbook, like how you talk about place and space and people. But I mean, but it was also for a purpose, right? It was intended to be intentionally like bad, once he realized that, he really didn't have no shot of disrupting, Axelrod's movement there. But like, that's a certain type of perspective. And if that type of that perspective is positioned to have actual influence, it will act in a way that goes like, yeah, like the shit I do is the shit that makes sense for everybody, whether they like it or not. You know what I mean? And
right.
I think that the way the show frames that, but then also juxtaposes that with these other ways that people, wield and use power, and then that like how you're connected to certain things. The way the district attorney of New York or Manhattan,
yeah,
she Manhattan district attorney, comes in and out of the scope, right? Like, the whole piece that comes out of really the previous season, when Chuck finally becomes attorney general of the state, but realize he don't have no power as it pertains to like the stuff he wants to do, like the thing he wants to do. He don't really gotta know. He don't have leverage. He don't have jurisdiction, and it doesn't really have like certain subpoena powers and all these other things and criminal powers the way that the DA does. So you gotta, and so then you had this interplay, but then there is and I think the show does a pretty good job, and I think it comes up a couple places of like the way people of color show up in certain positions, and that there is like it I think it touches on the tensions, but I think it doesn't reframe the show out of the main people who are the subjects of the show, but right. it does show it there. Like it's a part of some of that energy and tension and challenge there. Like when he goes after the sex worker stuff, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That's really important to her, right? Because as a woman, as a woman of color from a certain community and from like with an understanding of that world, you know what I'm saying, wants to impact and improve that situation, and is like, I'm gonna go after this thing that matters to you. Which is also the bizarre wildness of of systemic power and position, like to attack something that you care about just because I want to get what I want, right? So he has the same kind of gene as his pops, but it's not necessarily served towards some idea that it's improving the world in any way. It's just because that's what I want. It's a wild piece. I did like when they did they had the masks on, and then when like and I wonder for some folks in some work environments, like at the different stages of like vaccination, not vaccination, wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, whatever have you, of like he comes in, he's like, everybody in here should have a shot, you should be good to go. take the damn mask off. You know what I'm saying? But then, like, you know, our public awareness where later we're like, oh man, maybe put your mask back on. Like,
right.
like it's you know, that places are shaped by what's going on inside them, what the leaders in that place think are important. And you know, if you're in that space and you still like, yo, dog, I mean, I got shot. I'm still trying to kind of wear my mask all day. I don't really want to take no risk. It'd be like, but your boss who you make a whole lot of money from is like, nah, man, take that mask off. Like, you know, you might take the mask off.
Yeah, I mean, I think they show it revolves around this idea in the various permutations of power, right? In the various permutations of like will, and just in a turbocharged world where someone makes, you know, $700,000 for watching a screen, right? But the factors, whether you're at a small nonprofit or you're at a huge company, really remain the same, right? The idea of who directs what happens here, right? And I think also one thing this is the last thing I want to say on this was, one thing is interesting about all their positions, that none of them are truly held accountable to anybody else.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you know, you could argue with a board, you could argue with different things, but neither Chuck nor Axelrod nor anybody is actually held responsible to anyone else. They use resources from other people. They derive power from the skill at representing other people, whether it's Chuck being the AG or if it's Axelrod spending, you know, making people money, right? So they derive this power from people, but at the same time, they're not held accountable to those people in any particular way, right? And what does that mean in regard to the decisions that they make when you're not necessarily held accountable, which is different, I think, than a lot of other people's understanding of power, where it's you know, okay, you're the executive director of something, but then, you know, these other people decide if you get a raise, right? Where no one decides if Chuck does what he does, other than, you know, especially when you're elected, you're the AG. You know what I mean? Like, you're an elected official. You are the top law enforcement elected official of a state, right?
Right.
So no one actually decides if you're there until the people do 4 years from now. Right. So yeah.
Well, one thing I think though that they do have is they do have something to lose in the context of like status and and obviously money, but like there's no one to there's no one that can hold them accountable, but they do behave with a sense of like, I have a position and certain stuff that's happening that you know, I want to maintain that position. You know, and so when we think about like societal change and like why, you know, oh well, it's the money, that's why they won't give up this or that, and it's like, yeah, but like, how does that actually look in action and behavior, right? So if we're trying to move the world to some other place, whatever that place may be, in terms of the way the conditions and the things function for people, if we don't think about what would be lost, what would motivate you know, the individual to say, oh, I might need to act, right? And you know, when your man when they go dig up, you know what I mean, basically, you know how he did his man's Prince did his man's to get his initial, you know, kind of fortune.
Yeah.
That was something that really mattered to him, right? And he was, you know, concerned about losing face and this kind of thing he was trying to be, this entity he was trying to become, you know. Then also somewhere in arc he realized, he's like, well, you know, fuck it. Like, everybody knows now, Bloom's off the roads. I still got all this money. like I'm still the dude that got all this money and power. So, you know, I'm gonna have to let go a little bit of sort of the shining, you know, the shining moment in terms of maybe people seeing me with this, like, you know, the benevolent capitalist, so to speak.
And he became more dangerous then, right? I mean, in a real way, he became more dangerous once he got rid of the illusions of who people perceived him as.
Yeah. Like, you know, And that's like, I think something just to think when you think about human behavior dynamics and the way people behave, like sometimes we can think, oh, well, if you do this, like, it's like, I mean, I guess I don't know if it definitely is a TV trope, but I think some actual people sometimes think about their lives this way, where it's like, this will happen and then they'll ruin, I'm ruined. Right. And then it'd be like, I mean, I guess we could, I don't really want to dove into the idea of the cancel culture, so to speak, or whatever that means, which, as many things in our society, what people are saying is not necessarily what something is, in any facet. But the idea where you're like, well, I'll publicly shame this individual and then that'll motivate a change, right? If your idea is changing in them, right? Is it an attack on the idea? There's other things, but doing something to someone or creating something where someone's context for themselves, whether it makes them slink off of the public stage, or change in some other ways, it may or may not go the way you think it's going to go. Similar to when Big Chuck gets his kidney situation resolved.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It is just something, not to say that to take any particular actions or to push people to change, but just to be mindful if whatever one does to try to change way an actor in a system behaves, that when you do something that really impacts that particular actor, it may or may not go the way you think it's going to go. Like they might, it could go any number of ways. And like your man said, all right, well, it's whatever. Like I can't be the one that does the benevolent handshake with I don't know, the at the Nobel Prize, but I'm gonna still be I'm still getting an invite.
Right.
I'm still gonna get an invite. They just ain't gonna have me on stage. You know what I mean? Because I'm still within that strata. You know what I'm saying? I'm still within that world. And it's hard. It's hard to change, structural, power entities and formations and the way things are aligned. And I think the show, whether it's as accurate as one could perceive it, I think it does a good job of presenting that, like, there's a whole world of folks operating in this space. And and they think about the world in a certain kind of way, and they position themselves in a certain kind of way. And even within it, with people when they're doing the divorce stuff, and when talking about the money she makes, you're making a hell of a lot of money. It's hard to believe that you got to report to somebody when you're making that much money.
Right.
Right. Like it might be hard to comprehend the idea, like, oh man, I gotta report to this dude. You know what I'm saying? Talk to these people. You know what I mean? Because but you do. This person has like more money than that. So yeah, it's a good show though. I enjoy.
Yeah, good show. People should definitely check it out. It's definitely interesting for that interplay that Justice talked about.
Yeah, I would. Well, I don't know if they would do it, but if they interwheel, because they did that a couple years ago when Ask wanted to buy a team, an NFL team. Like that whole dynamic of like who you are as a public figure if you own an NFL team, and just in light of our other conversation, kind of go like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I guess the message of that was don't share the emails. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. And buy the Raiders, damn it. And take them back.
So
act to buy the Raiders and take them back.
So we have one more touch point to engage with before we let you go, and that's the return of the Wu-Tang show.
Season 2.
Season 2. I am not all the way through season 2, but I'm a few episodes in. I'm probably going to watch more while I go make some breakfast in a moment. What was some of your, what's the touch point when you coming in?
Well, I guess one is to look at season 1 and so a couple things. One, I think season 1 was slow on purpose. I think a lot of people were like season 1 kind of like it dragged, right? But I think season 1 was well served by dragging, so you didn't try to do everything in season 1, right? Because I think makes season 2 this much more interesting, and gives a lot of character to what's happening with them. And is actually just makes for more, I think, engaged watching. 2, what I'll say about that also is very similar to like different people have different favorite Godfathers for different reasons, except for 3. No one really likes 3. Me myself, I thought 3 was okay. Maybe it was just because of the age. I mean, it was what it was. It was campy. It was, every time every time I try to get out, they're pulling me back in. Leave the cannoli, take the gun. There just was a lot of campy, interesting things in 3 of me, right? It wasn't like good, right? So anyway, enough about that. But within Godfather 1 and Godfather 2, usually had people who were like, they really run the Godfather 1 or they really run the Godfather 2, and they thought the other one maybe dragged, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's much like that, right? Where you're like, okay, maybe season 1, you might have thought it dragged because it can create the season 2 that moves fast, right? And the characters are more fully developed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
2, is like Wu-Tang and American Saga. I think that's what the underline.
Yeah. It's
And I
American
think they've done, RZA and Alex C has done a good job at really, again, owing to season 1, kind of making it more of a tale, a saga, right? Like
right.
you're placing these people within like this experience and then this change, right? This transition from, which if you really do think about it is amazing. The idea that somebody gets a record deal, loses a record deal, goes through a situation of being in jail for attempted murder, and for self-defense, gets out of jail, comes back, finds 8 more people they grew up with, does a song, and within like 3 years of that become multi-billionaires.
Right.
Like,
internationally known. Yeah.
Internationally known, like that fast. I mean, I do think sometimes we can downplay like how unlikely that really is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think hip hop sometimes provides us with these, like you would say, touch points of different people, which almost normalizes something that's not really normal. So in the same way, Jay-Z was on tour with this person. Then he was selling drugs. Then he gets with these 2 other guys, puts a record out, and now by 1997, 1998, they're world superstars, and now he's $1 billion guy that lives with that's married to Beyonce. Right? Like
Beyonce, baby daddy.
Yeah. So
Beyonce's husband, I want to respect it.
If you keep telling the story of Wu-Tang, Diddy, maybe like Jay-Z, right? You Master P, right? You keep telling these stories, you start to rationalize something that is entirely like, that is not normal, dog. Like this doesn't happen. Right. As it stands to all of the rappers who have tried to do what those folks have done, including us, and now we had to go into real life and do things to help people, right? So yeah, I do think it is the idea, and then the premise of creating a story to show that transition and to show that growth makes for engrossing television. Right. People keep telling me like, you need to watch the second episode. You need to watch the second. Well, now it's kind of, just because I think culturally, some of the things I may take issue with, kind of made me be like, I don't know, this is great for, whoever likes it, but I don't know if it's something relevant to me. The second season, I think, as it pertains to culture and our cultural tenets are more realistic. They've kind of matured a lot in the sense of having those kind of cultural contextual dialogues and what it means. And I can definitely tell that the writer's room has grown. The writer's room has improved in the second one, according to a lot of even clothing. The clothing that they're wearing is definitely 92, 93-esque, you know what I mean? Like the little small leather jackets, right? When people start wearing Timbs, and when people, although it's hard for, I think, this generation to remember when more people wore black Timbs than construction Timbs.
Right.
Like, you forget that there was a time that like black Timbs was the movement. Constructions was almost like, all right, if you got them.
Right. It was like, oh, you're doing something different. You got
like they still Timbs, so we're still giving you your respect, but it definitely doesn't come off like you had a pair of black Timbs, right?
Yeah.
So I think that they have done a good job with it and locating, I think, a very unique story, and in some ways making it, a very American saga for all that means.
Mm-hmm. Well,
What's your take?
I think the interesting thing about the show, and just like the Motown age, we give that sort of that view of nostalgia, and like, oh man, what were they doing at Motown? Like, and so you think about, like, you would want to watch the the various other biopic type movies, the things that have come out, even in recent things. Like we
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, but and I think there's ones in other like genres, like they try to do like the biopic of like the Doors movie, or
right.
I think did someone actually make a Janis Joplin movie, or is that just someone keeps?
I think
I don't
it's
know.
like one of the things that sits out there, like you think there's a Janis Joplin movie coming, but
Right, but I don't know if it actually ever existed.
Like a large Professor album from the '90s, like you
Right.
think you think it's an album coming.
LP, man, we gonna make
coming.
that record, brother. You know what I'm saying? So, like, from our age, and again, to put in the context that this happened, started the arc of this story started 30 years ago. So it's not really unreasonable to do a biographical kind of look at that age and that window, right? And and I think of the artists and folks of that time, or of this time, it is an interesting, it's an outlier story. Like, there's I mean, we can name some other groups that was like, it was a whole lot of people and they was rapping and they had boots on and they had camo jackets and like field coats, and like, I mean, and then they got a record out, but that was and they not Wu-Tang. You know what I'm saying? Right. They're not Jay-Z, or they're not Master P and them, they're not Juvenile and the Cash Money Brothers, and they're not Scarface, they not Dre, you know what I'm saying, and Snoop and all them coming out of LA. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't happen for everyone where they become an international star, even if they find some success, right? They find some success within the industry, but where they jump into that other place, you know what I'm saying? Where people who don't know nothing about you, except they heard your song and they think it's, it's just dope. The W, man, that woo, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a real thing. And so it's just an interesting on one level.
It's an interesting point. I want to say, you add on, you make a point. It is the most enduring brand that hip hop has had up until now. I used to think it was the Run DMC, what's the name, right? Which was also a classic kind of branding, right? The classic symbol. That you would think about, it automatically evokes an idea, right? But I think, again, you're talking about something that was 30 years ago. And literally, someone can wear it today who does not even listen to Wu-Tang music. Right? There are people who will buy something with a W on it because it now has pop culture relevance in America or globally that has nothing to do with if they've actually ever listened to Inspector Deck.
Right. Or could name.
And I think,
anybody, all of them.
Yeah. And so I think that is to your point, a very unique part of why even this story is relevant. Very much in the same way, to your point, that, hey, the Motown was relevant to people and watching even variations like the 5 Heartbeats, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you can watch the Temptations, you can watch the Jacksons, right? But you could also have a spinoff of something that wasn't entirely real, but it was real enough. Right. It was based on something of that time. And I think hip hop, whether this one, whether Straight Outta Compton, although I think that was kind of like they captured it. And in some ways, even though the tentacles of what NWA did are as relevant as ever, as far as the permutations of it, it's not as like, I think Wu-Tang is actually, it happened then, it's happening now. You still might be able to you can go see Raekwon and Ghostface on tour, right?
Right.
And just on tour today, right? You can there's still a thing from that, right? The documentaries and the whole bit. So I do think it's an interesting way that they've been able to tell this story. And then obviously dramatize it, which has its own challenges, right? I just saw something from Fourth Disciple where he took some concern, he took some umbrage to how Wise was described in the show. You know, and that's where the challenge is, that it's not a docu series, right? It's a dramatization, right? And I think that's the ups and downs of dramatization, that it's not really meant to get it totally right, but it's meant to be like what you say, nearly right and exact. Right. The culture is meant to be nearly right and exact, right? So it's not meant to be 100% right and exact. It's meant to but also keep you watching something. And if that means you don't tell the whole story about General Wise, then that gets lost. But I can understand, because it doesn't get lost to people who cared about him. Right. It's lost. If you don't know who that is, then it doesn't matter. But if you do know who it is, you don't want that person being perceived or seen this way in shows, right? So I think that is also the challenge that they have, is for it to remain interesting, but at the same time, I think given to maybe some of the inclinations of people around them, say it also remains just and true.
Yeah. And I think that's the I think there's a positive thing that we exist in the current, media structure apparatus and tools, that there's, in the 80s, there would not have been enough outlets and vehicles. I mean, generally the 80s was, you could get certain stuff with Black people on TV, but there's a whole different thing there. But now there's so many different touch points where folks want to see different stories be happen, or be shared, or be told. And there's impetus and will, that basically there's everything in place where if something like this could be put together, right, and could be distributed. And then there's a whole channel in I think it is an FX show, right? It's an FX show.
It's on Hulu.
It's on Hulu, but I think it's because but basically a entity that trades in doing these types of stories, right? You know what I'm saying? Like that's their thing. It's like, oh, we touch these type of drones, right? So like that is one is a product of our modern age. But then the other piece is still true. Like it's a representation of life. It's not the actual life, right? And so within that, things are going to be de-emphasized or overemphasized. Things are going to be elevated. People are not going to be a true full representation of their character. But it may be some level to what one would find, or what the writer and the creators think is believable to the audience, or engrossing to the audience. Maybe not believable. It's an interesting. It's sort of, like I said, even though I don't think that was actually Steubenville in the in the thing. It looked Steubenville-ish. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Like it looked like, if any of y'all that been to southwestern Pennsylvania, upper West Virginia, southeastern Ohio. Yeah. You know what them towns and cities look like? They look Steubenville-ish. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that was actually, the city of Steubenville. You know what I mean? But then, like I have that context, but other people may have like I ain't never been to none of them places. So I guess that's what it looked like there, right? Like, but these are the things that when you're telling a story, especially in this age, like how much does it feel like this could really be this place? You know what I'm saying? Even the piece when the bull that get into it with the RZA, that like he was, he was the man at football. Is that some real Ohio shit? You know what I'm saying? Like you was dope at football at high school, and then it ain't really work out. But like people know you because you was dope in football in high school, but you know what I mean, it ain't really work out, and now hopefully you get away from a life of crime, but maybe you dabble because you're disillusioned. You know what I mean? Into the streets. You know what I mean? But like these are very real actors within the culture of some of those societies, and it's there's still parts of it that for me are sort of like. I go ahead and accept, like, Bull don't really make me think of the RZA, but he keep working at it, so I accept it. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, look a little short to be the RZA, but that's okay. You know what I'm saying? We just gonna keep moving forward.
Some people spot on, yeah. Some people are spot on, and some people just ain't. Yeah. Right? Like the RZA's character, one with, I understand the RZA talks in clip tones, but like here's what we're going to do. We got to figure this out. Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, you know, but no, I think trying to, again, when people are still around and alive, it all becomes that challenge when you're trying to capture somebody, because it's like, I don't look like that person. Where it's like, again, nearly right and exact.
Right. And then I did too that they brought up Dean Martin. Saying being for Steubenville.
Yeah, Steubenville.
That's, you know, but it's crazy. So, you know, I guess like my just rapid thought on it is like, you know, I'm going to try to finish, you know, keep working through, get to the end of this season, maybe touch back on it, but it's still a little bit surreal. I don't know if there's other. I mean, there's other. Definitely, you could make some other movies of folks from this era of hip hop. If you wanted to, I don't know. You know, I don't know what the entry point would be. You know what I mean, for some of the other stories. I mean, do you do? I mean, I know we've had the. I guess we've had the Biggie.
You've had the Biggie. You've had the Biggie. You've had the Pac. You've had the NWA, frankly. And now you have this show, right? So I do think at some point there, I don't know who else. I mean, again, the Jay-Z story. The Jay-Z story it has its own level of interest, but I don't know how you kind of you put into movies like wants to watch them break up from Rockefeller and all that stuff. And also, I do got to say, I think it's going to be interesting when they get into the other seasons of how, well, two things. You can see the seeds of why Wu-Tang had a run, but you know, kind of fell apart. Mm-hmm. And you can see the seeds of it actually in how they even describe how it all came together, right? Yeah. Like the very nature of it was this dependence on this path. And then that path gets to a certain place and things start to break down because, you know, it wasn't like these people, they all knew each other, but at the same time, they all were doing their own thing and were brought together to do something very particular, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So you can see that. And I do wonder how they're going to tell that if, you know, assuming I think the success of the second season will lead to a third, but then what does a third season start to look like? Right. And how much are you going to tell the truth about some of the stuff? Again, some of that stuff that's still raw, right? Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like some of that stuff is still out there and people have feelings about it on a number of different levels. Yeah. Old Dirty's, A-Song Unique challenges, all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Indeed. Hey, all right. Well, I don't know. I think we covered it.
My
man. So I don't know. Anything for the good of the order?
I think we're good. We G to G, as my father used to tell me in the 80s. I ain't want to hear him say it. We're good to go.
My bad. I'm holler at him. I'm going to be back out the way in a couple of weeks. But I'll tell you that, you know, not here on the recording. So,
all right.
You know what I mean? So with that, I'm going to say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, I'm Majestic. I try to record regularly. You know, I could say weekly, could say bi-weekly, who knows? However, we try to come together regularly and just keep you abreast of some of the things that are on our heads and hearts as we move through the world. You can support the podcast, 1, by doing what you're doing right now, which is listening. 2, by sharing with someone that you think might enjoy it or just someone that you randomly ran into. The next thing you can do is you can look up Justice Rajee on Patreon and become a patron. It's a great way to help me offset the cost that it costs me to you know, keep these things on the internet. You know, contrary to popular belief, the internet is not actually free. Who knew? But in any event, I appreciate you for listening, and I hope that you found something of value in our discussion and our dialogue. So more to come. Until next time, thank you and be safe. Peace.